Through the 70s and 80s, GM was beset by challenges, such as the oil crisis, poor product quality and decisions, and struggle to compete against the influx of high-quality, reliable Japanese vehicles. So in 1989, the General hit on an idea to create a sub-brand within Chevrolet composed entirely of badge-engineered, imported, subcompact vehicles. Thus, GEO was born, and it managed to last only 8 years before its experiment was concluded and it faded into obscurity. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. If you're new here, my name is John, and this is a far too brief history of GEO. During the 80s, while GM was hemorrhaging money and market share, they, along with Ford and Chrysler, quickly partnered with Japanese manufacturers to import and sell badge-engineered cars. Chrysler partnered with Mitsubishi, Ford with Mazda, and GM with Toyota, Suzuki, and Isuzu. GM's partnership with Toyota and the roots of the GEO brand stretched back to 1984 and the formation of the new United Motor Manufacturing Inc., or NUMMI. GM had a factory in Fremont, California that was a dumpster fire, and by the United Auto Workers' own admission had, quote, the worst workforce in the automobile industry in the United States. Still, those very workers were shocked when GM gave up and closed the factory in 1982. Honestly, the story of NUMMI deserves its own video one day, but GM and Toyota agreed to partner to build a version of the Toyota Sprinter, or more specifically, the US Toyota Corolla. GM could get a fuel-efficient and high-quality small car while learning Toyota's production methods, and Toyota got their first manufacturing in the US, bypassing the voluntary quotas Japanese manufacturers held to, and learning how to navigate the American unions from General Motors of all companies. Toyota management successfully changed the culture within the factory, and in 1984, as a 1985 model, the fifth-generation Chevy Nova, based on Toyota's AE82 platform, was released and sold well through 1988. GM also worked with Isuzu to take their iMark, known as the Gemini outside the US, and sell a version as the Chevy Spectrum from 1985 on, but sales were slow as this was imported and subject to those sales quotas. Also, GM worked with Suzuki, bringing the Suzuki Cultus to Chevy as the Sprint, rolling out nationwide in 1986, and in 1987, a version debuted as the Chevy Sprint Metro. That's important for later. It was in this atmosphere GM decided to group their imported cars into a new sub-brand called GEO for 1989. The Spectrum was renamed the GEO Spectrum, while the Nova had been canceled and replaced with the Prism, still built alongside the Corolla at NUMMI. With advertising that leaned heavily into affordability, the youth, and fun market, GM spent heavily to build name recognition for the brand, with the GEO globe with a Chevy bow tie signage added to Chevy dealerships, and the catchy jingle, quote, "Getting to Know You" by Rogers and Hammerstein worming its way into the airwaves.
GEO.
Getting to know you.
At your Chevrolet GEO dealers.
The Spectrum only lasted for one model year as a GEO before being replaced with either a 4-door sedan or a 3-door hatchback, both with only a 1.5-liter single overhead cam engine pumping out 70 rampaging Japanese horsepowers. General Motors put so little effort into the transition to GEO that the Spectrum came with the same grille with a Chevy bow tie still on it, but the rear Chevrolet was replaced with a GEO emblem. The Prism, yes, for some reason marketing decided to spell it that way, was based on Toyota's AE92 platform and came as a 4-door sedan or nifty 5-door hatchback, initially with a dual overhead cam 1.6 4A FE engine making 102 horsepower and 107 pound-feet of torque. For the 1990 model year, a rare GSI model got the dual overhead cam 1.6 4A GE engine making 130 horsepower. But perhaps most famous is the Geo Metro. Replacing the Chevy Sprint but adopting the Metro name from the Sprint Metro, it was the smallest and cheapest GEO, and it lived down to that expectation. While the Suzuki version, the Swift, was widely sold around the world under a variety of names, including the Pontiac Firefly in Canada, which I think is a great name, it had several engines available. a 1.0 liter 3-cylinder making all of 52 horsepower, a 1.4 liter 4-cylinder, and later a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder, and Canada exclusively got a turbocharged 3-cylinder. Strangely, GM decided the smallest engine was the only engine the Geo Metro deserved in America. For the US, the 1-liter engine was rated at 60 horsepower in standard form. For 1990, an optional version was made available on the XFI trim line, lowering the horsepower to 49, but giving it 53 city and 58 highway mileage ratings. While Canada got the Japanese-built 4-door sedans, initially the US received only the hatchback versions built in Ingersoll, Canada, at the joint GM and Suzuki plant called Kami Assembly. Later, a convertible Metro was released that went on to some level of notoriety by itself. Focused on cheap, efficient transportation, the Metro even got a dishonorable mention in The Simpsons.
I'm scared! Come on, Matt, move this thing!
I can't! It's a Geo!
Rounding out the initial offerings for 1989, the mini SUV Geo Tracker was a rebadge of the Suzuki Sidekick and also built at the Kami factory. Initially offered as either a convertible or hardtop, the first two model years were available only with a 5-speed manual and 4-wheel drive, mated to a 1.6-liter single overhead cam 4 making 80 horsepower, while later a GM 3-speed auto was optional. 2-wheel drives were made available in 1992. In 96, the hardtop was dropped and a 4-door model was offered with a 95 horsepower engine and optional 4-speed automatic. Like other Geos, it was marketed as cute and fun, but it had real off-road chops, including 4-wheel drive with low range, and became well respected. Interestingly, to avoid the 25% chicken tax, all Canadian-built trackers were sent to the US, while Canada's own supply was provided from Japan. For 1990, the Spectrum was canceled and replaced with the Geo Storm, once again based on an Isuzu, this time the Impulse. The most popular body style was a 3-door fastback, but for 1991, they offered a 3-door hatchback that was really a mini station wagon. The base engine was a single overhead cam 1.64 making 95 horsepower, while the sporty GSI trim received the dual overhead cam version making 130 horsepower. The Storm received a restyle in 92, removing the semi-pop-up headlights, and the GSI trim got a 1.8-liter 4 now making 140 horsepower. It's worth noting that the Impulse was based on the Isuzu Piazza. While it can be argued the Storm was better looking, the Impulse was a far more interesting vehicle. Its styling was influenced by GM, who owned nearly one-half of Isuzu, and especially by GM's involvement in the design of the M100 Lotus Elan. The Impulse also had a Lotus-tuned suspension, an optional turbocharged engine good for 180 horsepower, and optional all-wheel drive. Still, it was a slow seller, and sales of the Storm ended after 93 because Isuzu simply stopped producing passenger cars. In 1992, the second-generation Geo Prism, still with its misspelled name, was freshly styled and slightly larger, still based on the Toyota Corolla. The base engine was the 1.6-liter, but a new optional 1.8-liter was available on the higher LSI trim line. For 95, the second-generation Metro, based on the third-generation Suzuki Swift, was introduced as a 3-door hatchback or a 4-door sedan with much more contemporary styling, influenced by the Chevy Cavalier, and it was slightly larger. The 1-liter 3-cylinder returned and became the last engine available in the US with throttle body injection. A revised 1.3-liter 4 making 70 horsepower became available. In spite of strong sales, Geo was discontinued on June 16, 1997, but the models lived on for a time, all now as simply rebadged Chevrolets. The Chevy Prism was redesigned in 1998 along with the Corolla, continuing until it was canceled for the 2002 model year. The Metro continued until 2001 with a new 16-valve version of the 1.3-liter 4 being offered from 1998 on, and for the last year only the 4-door LSI sedan was offered. The Tracker was at first just rebadged as a Chevy, but received a complete redesign for 1999 and diverged from the Suzuki Sidekick's replacement, the Grand Vitara. Now, Suzuki sold the Vitara based on the Tracker, and it was shorter and smaller than the Grand Vitara. The Tracker model was canceled in 2004, being the longest-running Geo model. One final bit of trivia about Geo: two different models were actually popular for an EV conversion. Selectria Corporation took examples from both the first and second generation Metro and converted them into the Selectria Force, with either lead acid or nickel metal hydride batteries giving ranges of 50 or 100 miles respectively, a top speed of 70 miles an hour, and prices of $34,000 or $89,000 respectively. Famously, the North Jersey District Water Supply Commission purchased a 1996 Force that is still being used today. The second model was the 93 Prism conversion by US Electricar, which you may remember from my previous video where they'd converted Chevy S10s to battery electric. Their cleverly named sedan used a Hughes AC traction motor derived from GM's EV1 lead-acid batteries and had a range of about 41 miles at 60 miles an hour. If you'd told me that GM had started the Geo brand in the early 80s, I probably would have believed you, because I remember the models like the Spectrum rolling around there, and it's kind of shocking to me that it took until 1988, 1989 for GM to come up with this idea of putting imports under a sub-brand within Chevy itself. From a business perspective, it makes some sense. GM was struggling to build small cars, to build them well, and to make them profitable. So taking imported cars and giving your buyers an option to keep them under the Chevy and under the GM umbrella makes some sense. Somebody walks in and looks at a Cavalier, or God help them, a Chevette, and they want to walk away, but you can put them over here into a Prism. That's a win. But GM had to have two new plants, low profit small cars, entire new marketing budget, and all of that was simply to compete against their own cars within the same dealership. It's kind of like Saturn, it was just more affordable. And what's the legacy of Geo? I think that many people today, certainly younger than me, may not even know of Geo as a brand. The early trackers are well regarded for off-road use, while later ones used rack and pinion steering that ended up being a little bit more fragile. The Prism and the Spectrum are largely forgotten. The Metro has risen to almost a cult-like status for its fuel efficiency, with Car and Driver back in 2009 adding one to a comparison test with the Honda Insight and Toyota Prius hybrids. While they heavily criticized the Metro for its content, it actually ended up matching the Prius at 42 miles per gallon. But its lightweight, its low power, and insubstantial feel means it's remembered mostly as being just a disposable vehicle, especially that convertible that was not well known for structural rigidity. The Storm was a sales success and is well regarded in amateur racing scene, and several models have become popular for being ridiculously modified over the years. Thanks for being here, and thanks to my patrons who make all of this possible. And if you support news opinions and histories just like this, please check that out and consider becoming a supporter. If you like the video, well, there is a button for that below. Feel free to click on it, and if you do feel like I've earned it, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for being here and spending just a few minutes with me.